Hello and welcome back to The Reluctant Chef. My name is Bob, and today we're going to make a tuna noodle casserole, one of those mainstays of church suppers and other potluck meals, and just the perfect dish for the reluctant chef. We're going to start with our mise en place. That is to say, get our stuff together before we start to cook. We're going to start with canned tuna, and we're going to drain them in just a minute because these are packed in water. 3 cups of curly noodles. What we have here is a cup of chopped celery, a 1/4 cup of coarsely chopped onion, which we're going to saute in a minute with the celery, 2 tablespoons of butter, 1 can of cream of mushroom soup, 3/4 cup of milk. We're going to use whole milk. You can use reduced fat. You can use 2%. A 1/4 cup of pimento in small dices, 7 to 8 ounces of peas, 2 tablespoons of finely grated Parmesan cheese, 2 tablespoons of finely snipped parsley. We actually are going to use fresh parsley today. I'm going to need a strainer and of course my handy dandy tool here for sliding things around. And we're going to need medium-sized mixing bowl to stir up the filling in. First of all, when we get this whole thing ready to go in the oven, we need a casserole dish to put it in. I've got my olive oil handy here, clean paper towel. I'll tell you in a minute what I'm going to do with it. Vessel of salt, and pepper, and then of course I've got my saucepan, although we're going to saute in it. Pot ready to cook the noodles in, and then I've got my pot holders ready. The next thing we're going to do is preheat the oven. Casserole needs to bake at 375 degrees. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start the tuna to draining. Like I said, it's packed in water. So what I'm going to do is dump it into this strainer. Now I'm just going to leave the tuna in there to drain for a few minutes. Next thing we want to do is get the noodles up and running. Now, if I refer back to the directions, we want to boil the noodles in approximately 3 quarts of water. Before we put the water in the pot, the directions ask for a couple of tablespoons of salt and water that we're going to boil the noodles in. Though the directions don't say so, I'm going to put in, I don't know, about a tablespoon of olive oil. That has nothing to do with the flavor of the noodles. The reason I'm doing that is because it's going to make the noodles less likely to stick together, both when they're boiling and when they come out of the pot. All right, water is going to take a few minutes to start coming to a rapid boil. So in the meantime, I'm going to transfer the tuna into a mid-sized mixing bowl, and I want one a little bigger than the tuna, because we've got some other things that we're going to add to it. And it looks like it's pretty well drained. Before I forget, I'm going to take this salad fork and I'm going to break up the tuna. It came out of the can with some fairly large chunks, and when we mix this whole thing together, we want to be able to evenly distribute the tuna throughout the other ingredients, so we don't want any big chunks. Okay, now let's get the sauce started here. Now for that, we're going to need the butter to saute the onion and the celery in, and then of course our celery and onion that we're going to saute. So what we want to do, we're going to be very, very careful because we want to start this at a fairly high heat, but we don't want to burn the butter. If you get it just right, you can see the butter foaming up. When the butter is foaming, that is a good time to toss in the celery and the onion, and we're going to take a risk and leave the heat pretty high here. And throw in the celery. Now, can you hear it sizzle? That tells us we've got it in there at the right time, because it actually should sizzle. So we get the onion in there, stir it around. We're going to leave the heat pretty hot here, just 30-40 seconds. Now, since we've got it rolling here, I'm going to turn down the heat a little bit because I certainly don't want to burn it. All right, let's check on our boiling water. Oh, my goodness. Quickly. The water has come to a rapid boil. We want it to be at a rapid boil when we slide in the noodles. What we're going to do is we're going to set the timer for 6 minutes. Now, I based that, again, on what the directions that I salvaged from the package say. We cook the noodles for 6 minutes if we want them al dente, and 8 minutes if we want them tender. Because we're going to put them into a casserole which is going to bake, we don't want them cooked any more than al dente. Now, I could use one of those non-stick cooking sprays to spray the pan, but I found that when I use that, I end up with spray all over the countertop. So I just take a clean paper towel, dip it in some olive oil, and I use that to grease the pan. So now that is ready. So, get these emptied into this strainer. We're going to rinse them briefly with cold water. The reason for that is that I want them to stop cooking. So now we can get back to assembling the rest of the sauce. First thing, our condensed cream of mushroom soup. Now, because it's condensed, it's thick, sort of by definition. So, it makes it hard to get it all out of the can. Now, I don't like to waste anything. So what I do is instead of pouring the milk directly into the bowl, I pour it into the soup can, and then I take my fork and I stir it up. And that way I get the last, almost all the last little bits of the condensed soup poured into the bowl. And let's see, let's get that a little bit mixed up there. All right, that's nicely blended. Now, probably ought to interrupt myself here and double check on the onion and the celery. I can see now the onion's getting translucent, beginning to get a little brown around the edges, and the celery is getting cooked down. So actually we're almost there. So I'm going to turn the heat off, and I'm going to move it off the burner. The pan is still hot. You know, you can see it's still sizzling, but I don't want to overdo it. So now, go ahead and dump in the pimento, our peas, blend all of that. Now, we do want to add, as we say, salt and pepper to taste. That is to say, however much or how little we think that we're going to want here. This is a good time. There's a good time to put it in because it gets a little lumpy later and it's a little harder to blend. So what I'm going to do is blend that in, and we're going to pour it into the pan with the onion and the celery. Now, you might have thought that I was using an awful big pan to saute a little bit of onion and celery in. And I should have mentioned up front why I was doing that. And the reason I was doing that is because we add the sauce, and then we're going to add the noodles, and the pan fills up. And we just want to combine it. We want everybody to get a little bit of everything in their serving. We don't want uneven distribution of the content. Now we're going to get our cooked noodles, and all we're going to do is just slide them into the pan, and then gently but thoroughly stir the whole thing up. We don't want to be breaking down the ingredients. We want them to stay pretty much intact, but we do want it to be thoroughly combined. So, ready to go. All we have to do now is empty it into the casserole. Smooth out a little bit. Perfect. Okay, last step. We're going to take our finely grated Parmesan cheese and sprinkle it over the top. Try to get it evenly distributed if we can. All right, so now it is ready to go into the oven. Now the directions say it is to bake for 25 to 30 minutes. So I'm going to set the timer for 25 minutes for the low end of the recommended time period and then check on it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the casserole out of the oven and test it to make sure that it's heated all the way through. And yes, okay, I can see steam rising off of there, so I know it's plenty heated through. Now, it's going to need to sit for about 5 minutes. We don't want anybody to burn their tongue. And then when we're ready to put it on the table, we're going to just sprinkle this little bit of parsley on top. Makes it look a little dressier, and we can pick up the fragrance of the parsley, and it actually will add a little bit of the flavor. And there we have it. And with that, I leave you with my best wishes.